important, and such, which would be identifications, driver's license, and all that stuff legally for the kingdom and for our people. That includes marriage certificate, death certificates, all the stuff. And I'm going to turn it over to Michael, who is quite brilliant in his field. Sometimes he speaks, goes over my head, but then I catch it and comes back and I understand it. But thank you. Michael, please.
Your Highness, thank you for the opportunity to be here. If you could allow me.
Can you,
yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here. If you could allow me to share my screen, I can start.
Oh, yes. Hold on. Kirk, you turn host back over to me. You're on mute.
I'm just getting the chat and pin again.
It looked like it was turned over to Michael Johnston instead of Michael Prosper.
Right, I picked the wrong Michael, sorry. Michael Johnston, you're up. Tag, you're it.
Michael, can you turn that post back over to me, please? Michael Johnson.
Just so everybody knows, there'll be a new technology that can have this same type of a meeting where we all connect online, but we can all share our screens at the same time. So
Michael, I need you to turn over go to your thing. Can you go off mute? Michael?
That sounds awesome, Michael.
Michael Johnston?
Yes, Michael Johnson. Thank you.
Hold on, I'm just figuring it out. I've not done this before.
Brett,
Just-
can you guide him?
Yeah, hover over the king's name till you see the three dots.
Yeah.
Then it'll click on those, it'll pull down an option and then make him the host.
Make host. Okay, done.
Okay.
Thank you for the tutorial.
No worries.
Should be handed over.
It is. Thank you. Michael Proper, you're on.
Thank you, Your Highness. So you should be able to see my screen now. And
Yes.
I'll put this over here. So what we had the opportunity to review prior was the importance of using what we call decentralized systems, which is really a system that I believe is an eternal principle. It's similar to how our bodies work at the cellular layer and how the universe works. It all has intelligent design that is behind it, and things just know their order. They know how to fit into their order. And it's an infinite loop, so to speak, so it continues. And we've spent the last 13 years helping to build decentralized systems. The way that humanity interacts with it is through access devices, also known as phones, even though these devices are probably only 10% used as a phone. The majority of the time, we're using them as cameras and taking memories and creating a digital footprint, if you will. But we're connecting them into systems that are centralized, such as Apple and Google. With this system, it basically creates an environment where you can connect them into decentralized systems, which is not Apple or Google and is controlled by the individual. It's controlled by the individual by basically what we call encryption keys. And these encryption keys are just known as 12 words. Those 12 words come out to the combination of what encryption key can do with the human body when you link it with a fingerprint. If you're using an Apple device and you've linked your face to the Apple device, it will automatically use that in addition to the fingerprint. So what we're talking about is really using decentralized systems to further and leapfrog over the centralized systems that we get the opportunity to live in today, but are really taking away our privacy, our identity, and our freedoms. And I believe it creates a compelling event and opportunity for the kingdom of Hawaii and many others to come together and utilize these types of systems for the betterment of humanity in the future. What I'll do is I'll try and step over some of the things that we discussed prior, and so you can kind of understand what it does. So it's got an identity management system in it. Why? Because identity is actually something that has been stolen from individuals. And I would say a large portion of why people are living on the streets is because they give up to be able to operate within the centralized systems. They give up the need to be able to carry a certain ID, an ID that really in the future will end up controlling us. This real ID, for those of you that are having to get it and starting to get it, it has the little star in the top right-hand corner. This system actually uses a cryptographic system built into this identification card, which is actually using cryptography, just like what we talked about with these numbers, but these numbers are not given to the individual. They're given to a centralized system. Namely, when you go through the security systems in different parts of the world, such as at airports or even in banking systems, you won't be able to open a bank account after this May 7th, 2025, you won't be able to even go into banks. Or if you want to even go into, let's say you want to go to the archives for the Kingdom of Hawaii. You want to go see what this kingdom was built on before it was taken. You won't even be able to go in there without one of these IDs. You won't be able to go into the airports. Right now, I don't know if you've noticed, but you don't even need a ticket to get in through security. You just need an ID. And they don't even care if it's expired at the airports. They care everywhere else. But if you actually have an identification card that has these little marks on top of it, they will accept it, because in the future they'll start closing it down. Identity is something that was stripped from the Hawaiians long ago. It was taken out of the education systems. Language was taken out of the education systems. And as time goes on, as land, I met a wonderful individual, Kamanu. His home was burnt. His school was burnt. His work was burnt. His birth certificate was burnt. He went back to get a new birth certificate, and they said, go to the state. So he goes to the state, gets a new birth certificate, and it says that he's half Japanese and Caucasian. For those of you that know Wilmot, you know that Kamanu, his brother is Willie K, for those of you that don't know him. Wonderful man. But imagine a future where instead of actually centralizing our identity, we actually can mask our name. And through masking our name, we gain the ability to actually exist, and we can control it. And imagine an environment where if we fast forward, and I don't want to make things too complicated for folks, but imagine a world, and I'm gonna try and imagine a world where different vendors, such as airways, hotels, cruises, vehicles, any insurance, like we just talked about in the insurance world. Insurance is a really good example because they basically start knowing everything about you. If they're going to insure your vehicles, they're going to know who lives in the household. They're going to know the ages of the family members. If they're going to insure your life, they're going to know your history. And then they're going to link that data to banking institutions. When you link all of these data together, you end up with centralized controls. But if vendors such as airlines, hotels, cruises, vehicles, insurance companies, retail, health, education, and government allow the individual to actually own their own identity, their own data, and all they have to do is say that they'll actually take an identity card that is not a part of the centralized system where an individual is actually profiled. For instance, yesterday I had the opportunity to call the state of Hawaii's First District Court from a parking ticket that was issued to someone that wasn't even driving their vehicle, but yet they used the parking ticket as notice and automatically send out a default judgment to the individual, even though the individual didn't drive and didn't even know about it. And I don't know if you know this, but in the state of Hawaii, they literally have taken, hello, you're okay. They literally have taken the 7 years that it actually is supposedly on record, and they've pushed it to 55 years. When we understand what the Jubilee is and what these 7 years represents or 70 years represent, we understand the importance of one's data and identity. And so imagine vendors that actually would go and conform, whether they're hotels, whether they're, maybe it's a vehicle type service, but they would actually conform to a type of policy that provides protection for the individual. The individual has a human right to basically own their own identity. Imagine a world where, I don't know if you're familiar with the European Union and what happened with GDPR, but GDPR is they provided notice that if their data within the European Union, the 27 countries within the European Union, the citizens or nationals within that environment, thank you so very much, were actually profiled without their consent. Now, consent is a very important word. So if an individual goes to a website and there's information that's collected about them without that individual consenting to that information, then that's a violation of a process within the United Nations under GDPR. Now, they went through that process, they provided the notice, and then I don't know if you remember, about 4 or 5 years ago, all the websites started having this little cookie disclaimer. That is actually how these guys can get into compliance. But what they did was they didn't ask them for it. They said this is actually how it's going to be in the European Union. And so that European Union then started tasking and creating legal suits against centralized organizations that were profiling these different individuals and storing their data in centralized databases. And they have won against many of them, including some of the brands that I showed. Marriott, Amazon, Facebook, to just name 3. And I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of millions and into the billions of dollars. And all it is some countries coming together and actually creating policy that can actually enact something that is of the future. Imagine the ability for a Pacific Union to actually come together and do something similar to it. Imagine what we talked about just a second ago was insurance. What if banking and security and exchanges, all of it were united together in a way that systems actually leapfrogged over the existing centralized systems, but allowed the individual to actually own their own identity, which included their reputation, their assets, their exhaust, their payment systems. And it actually replaced the existing payment systems that we currently know around the world. But we know that digital systems are coming. The question is, will they be centralized or decentralized? And I believe that the part of this world, I'm actually going to show a different screen real fast because I don't think we really understand, at least I didn't personally. When we look at this amazing earth that we get the opportunity to live on, that we've been given the opportunity, more than half of it, this is a map that is to scale. When we look at maps, they don't print the maps to scale. More than half of the whole earth is the Pacific Ocean. In the center of it is the Hawaiian Islands. The kingdom that we're discussing right now has the utmost importance for humanity. The utmost importance. The things that the king talked about earlier today around destruction and devastation and wars and rumors of wars, we need not look too far back to understand that it is reality. As a matter of fact, the European Union was created from this reality in the Second World War. 6 countries came together and said, this is not right. The lives don't have to end this way. We don't have to fight this way. And then now we fast forward and we have a European Union with 27 countries that are together with the euro, with the financial system, and they're talking about basic human rights. Well, some of the basic human rights tie to the ability to travel, to move around. Imagine within Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, 25,000 individual islands plus, over 40 billion acres of people coming together and saying, enough is enough. Imagine countries standing up. And it's not just America separating the Americans from the Hawaiians. And that doesn't have to be an ugly thing. It can actually be a very beautiful thing. I know that it will be because of the spirit of aloha, because of the spirit in which we start this meeting and we end this meeting by giving thanks. That is also why I believe the kingdom of Hawaii was taken, is because they didn't want to raise up arms and fight, but they knew what was right or what was wrong. When you look at Aotearoa and New Zealand, there was a treaty. The first will be the last, and the last will be the first. That Treaty of Waitangi was not upheld. That Treaty of Waitangi was not upheld. That's a different conversation. So when we get back to some of the things we're talking about, identity is very important, from birth to adoption, from hanaiing individuals such as myself or others into an ecosystem that can actually enable aloha for all of humanity. For people that want to get married, and they make these commitments not to a government or a county or a state or a federation or a providence. They make the covenants and the commitments to one another, a male and a female. In some cases, it's different, but that's a different conversation. And in one of those conversations, I believe that the Hawaiian Kingdom actually solved. You talk about identity between a man and a woman versus a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, or differences. The Kingdom of Hawaii solved it long ago. And the things that are being perverted around it today, and how evil and dark and the contrast, I believe that the Kingdom of Hawaii already has a simple answer for it. But the point is a covenant and a commitment in a marriage is tied between an individual and an individual under God, not under some type of jurisdiction that we put in the middle of us and God. And that's one of the reasons why I believe decentralized technologies can actually enable that, because it's not technology that does it, it's the individuals that do it. It puts the responsibility to the individual, the accountability to the individual. Can they drive? Do they care about one another? When they're driving, do they actually have the skills? That's part of it. Do they have a safe vehicle? That's part of it. But do they really care about one another? For instance, in New Zealand or Aotearoa, when you drive and you get in a car accident, you can't sue someone. The insurance down there does not comply with lawsuits. They comply with vehicle damage and health damage. The health system is inclusive. You know, you talk about some of the nightmare topics in that spider web of health insurance and different kinds of insurance. It's a whole nother conversation when an individual is accountable for their own identity in life. You know, when you talk about pharma, you talk about insurance, I believe that's a part of the centralized secret combinations that also enslave humanity. We talk about death. We talk about taking assets. Many states today get hundreds of millions of dollars every single year in unclaimed assets because of death. People don't understand what's in bank accounts. They don't understand land ownership. But with a cryptographic-based system, that identity is actually understood. Most cultures today, I was born in Utah. I grew up in an amazing part of the world. I have an amazing family. The ecosystem that is here, and many others. But the point is how does the family know and understand what you have? And it's usually these family units that break apart, and the children that were raised by the parents go off on their own and continue to raise. But in other parts of the world, the parents live with the children when they're older. And in so many parts of the world, that is disconnected. But the ability to pass generational wealth is being broken and taken by governmental agencies or states, so to speak. When we talk about payments, when we talk about the ability for a consumer to actually purchase something from a merchant, and the ability for different things to be paid if there is a tax within a certain region. Imagine a new financial system where there is no fees, there is no tax, there is no wait to get the transfer, so it's instantaneous. There is no government and there is no bank. The individual can actually hold their assets, they don't lose their assets. And it's not just a monetary asset, but you can actually take it from a currency system to a reward system or to a security system, whether it's a private security or a public security. Imagine an ecosystem where, you know, financial management can actually be, or company management can actually be put in the hands of the individual, but there's total transparency behind it. Not what the Rockefellers did with the oil industry and how that had to get divided up, etc. Land management's another perfect example. Today, we have many counties, many states, many provinces that have their own land management systems, primarily because they get paid money because the tax value of it gets assessed and they get a property tax. But imagine one system, kind of like Wikipedia, where you have one globe. And I'll go ahead and show this again as an example. Imagine one system that the whole world basically worked within. So this is actually Maui. This is actually where the fires were. And this is actually what FEMA's working on. And you can actually see, depending on the layer that you want to look at, you can actually see the rebuilding happening in real time. You can literally see, like if I were to log in, I could show you how you can modify, how you can edit, all of it in real time. And if there's an issue with it, someone basically can raise it. And then the way that they actually go through that process of resolving the issue or the dispute is a similar system to what we're currently using today. We call this system today, we call it Zoom. But in the future, you'll see a system that will replace Zoom because it will let the individual own their own data, and it will let them, the big problem within this meeting is we couldn't even have ownership around who could actually share the screen. Have you noticed how complex it was? But if you give the individuals the accountability to own their own data and identity, and then maybe create problems or issues that need to be resolved and use technology to be able to do it, the technology can actually serve us instead of enslaving us. It can set us free. So when you look at some of these different technologies, it's not just a matter of land management or registration, but everything in which we own today. I shouldn't say everything, because there's a lot that we just don't even own and we don't even understand. That's basic gifts that we've been given. But we think we own a house, we think we own a car, we think we own a motorcycle, we think we own a plane, or whatever it is you want. So you go through a process of actually going and creating these, but what if you could actually issue a decentralized license plate for these vehicles? And whether you owned it or it was licensed prior by a state, you could actually go through a process. I think I've already got one up. Maybe not. If anybody has a license plate, I can show you how it actually works. Does anybody know a license plate?
LDL 317.
Let me
LHL 317.
let me pull it up real fast. Maybe I'm not logged in. Oh, here, I'll show everybody how the login works. So if you want to download Hawaiian Life, you can do it from any of the Apple or Google marketplaces. If you're running, like, there's other versions of it, like Tuvalu and Vanuatu and Fiji and Samoa and even other parts of the world, such as Saudi. But you download it and then you basically scan. So you've got your 12 words. You link the 12 words with your fingerprint. You don't need username and passwords anymore. You log into systems just like this. So you can actually come in and let's say that you purchased a vehicle or it was already previously licensed, however you want to look at it. And let's say, what was that license plate again?
LHL 317.
So we plug this in. You can do it with VIN numbers. You can do it with license plates. So if it depends on if you're purchasing it or it's already licensed within a particular state. Just like us as individuals, our cars are also profiled. You may not realize it, but they're literally tracked and traced as you drive around. It's not just a matter of who you are and where you go online, what you listen to, what you search, where you've been, how you're moving, but it'll happen really fast within vehicles. As a matter of fact, in the United States of America, it is mandatory that each vehicle actually have electronic kill switches built into them now, so they can be turned off remotely. There are many manufacturers, such as Volvo, that are 100% building their cars electric and with these centralized systems. But what if you could actually enter a vehicle in and automatically insure it, or finance it, or break up ownership in such a way where maybe if you were to pass on, how you know it would go to the next part of the world. Imagine a system where intelligence around these actual assets were given to the individual based upon the jurisdiction that they chose to be a part of. This is an example of a car management system, but it also look at births or adoptions or marriages or deaths that we already talked about, or disputes, maybe class action suits. Maybe you got a group of people that are tired of water being poisoned and they want to come together and they want to have a voice. This is an environment where their voice can be heard, but they can also get paid without any kind of perseverance. Think about it this way. There were some truck drivers up in Canada that said, you know what, enough is enough with these lockdowns. They stopped driving. they stopped making money and they started spending money to be able to drive their trucks into cities to protest. And then people said, you know what, we're running out of fuel, but we'll still give our time, we'll still give our vehicles. And so they raised 3 different rounds of massive amounts of money, from $10 million to $5 million. In between was also $8 million from 3 different platforms. Those platforms had the money was seized. It didn't go to the truck drivers. Then the individuals that paid the money were profiled. There were even police officers that showed up at their doorsteps in Canada that said, you shouldn't be involved in this. Your bank account may have been locked. The point that I'm driving at is the digital ecosystems are coming. Whether they're centralized or decentralized is imperative to humanity, and the kingdom of Hawaii will stand up. It will stand up with many other ecosystems that will do what is right to create a union that can actually empower us and free us, not just those that are Kanaka Maori or even Maori from Aotearoa, but those that actually are humans here on earth that want to choose to be a part of such a freedom, to want to choose to have covenants directly with an individual that they believe is their God, that want to understand that we are free. This work is much more than some technology. The ability to stand up the Hawaiian Islands is more important than freedom and land. The ability to actually register assets in an ecosystem that is free and independent, the ability to put a plate on a vehicle and to actually drive around without being profiled. But yet, if an officer needs to pull an individual over for whatever reason, they can scan a license plate and they can pull up more about that individual. I'll give you an example. So what I'll do is I'll log in to one of these ecosystems. I'm going to come to a company. So this is a good example. We're going to log into a company. If you want to create a company, it's just as simple as a scan. If you've already created a company, you select it. This is what the world sees for a company view. They can see a reputation. They can see, is it actually valid? They can see a cryptographic key for that particular company registered in the digital world. They can see a certificate of incorporation, if it's active or inactive or not. They can see the ability to understand who the members are. And if there are multiple members, they can actually try and see who those individuals are. So notice here, you can see, for those that know me, they know that this is my photo. For those that know me, they know this is my name. This is a cryptographic key based upon a derived key, so that machine learning and artificial intelligence cannot track or trace who these individuals are in the future. This system is the system for the new millennium. When people want to know and understand something about an individual, they scan it or they request it. The individual scans it, and then it sends a request to this individual to unlock it. Maybe it's something around a birth certificate. Maybe it's something around a vehicle registration. But the point being is that ability to actually look at this license plate, the individual on the other side of it, the officer, which is just as important. We cannot forget about law enforcement and people that actually want to keep the law, not a legal system. There's a difference between the court system, legal, versus a lawful law system and law-abiding citizens. We're not talking about hiding. We're not talking about evading. We're talking about taking accountability for oneself, just like the GDPR did within the European Union. The ability for an individual to actually be private, the ability for an individual to actually travel. For instance, in the United States of America, the Supreme Court under the Constitution actually already said you do not have to have a driver's license or a license plate unless you're permitting commerce, which is like you're an Uber driver. So if you basically can drive, which there's a safety element with the vehicle and the individual, can't be ignored, then you should be able to move around. Why is it that every year we have to get new tags and registrations? It's because the centralized tracking systems need a revenue source. Is it something that really drives emissions? How many of you have seen vehicles that don't even need safety anymore? How many of you seen vehicles that don't need emissions anymore? When we look at a license plate, we see an encryption key. This is actually a derived key in the top left, and the last 6 digits are actually the license plate number, which is what it'll end up being like. Imagine an environment, and by the way, Abe and anyone that wants to work on logo and brand, there'll be a beautiful conversation around that here in a second, because this is not the right brand. I would even go back and say this website is not the right brand. It has been built without even knowing what the Kingdom of Hawaii has been doing. And there's many other ecosystems, the Kingdom of Atui, what Don Calais has been doing, what Bumpy's been doing, what Keanu has been doing, what amazing man within Leon Su, of these, and Kamanu and the family. There's so many within the Hawaiian Islands that want to do what is right. The question is that brand and that other individual that was just brought in, it needs to be done correctly. That ties to another element. And I know I don't have a ton of time. I could talk for forever. We talk about banking. We talk about finance. We talk about insurance. We talk about securities. Those three things, banking, finance, and insurance or security, all of that can literally be governance that the Hawaiian Islands, specifically the Kingdom of Hawaii, can stand up and take leadership, not just for the Pacific, but for the whole world. It doesn't have to just be MasterCard or Visa. It could be nothing, because the system can actually govern itself. People can govern itself based upon true trust. I won't go into the details here because this is not my stewardship, but the ability for systems like this to actually be able to give an individual the ability to transact and to come together. For instance, this is today's council meeting. We have a general council, we have a mark, we have an objective, we have an agenda, we have people that are actually doing certain things, like we heard from this individual. This individual was delayed. We heard from this individual on insurance. Today, right now, you're hearing from me. Then you'll have, and if I refresh this, now notice how this 20 minutes, because I'm taking a little bit more time, that 20 minutes, you can see that you can modify and manage this whole system within its own ecosystem. So when you log in, you actually have the ability to manage these types of things. So for instance, two things that could come from my dialogue today. One is around branding, which people can say, you know what, I don't agree with the branding today, for instance. And if you actually click on this right here, it'll pull up a branding document that ties to, this could be a style guide. So there's 2 or 3 people that are on the branding and Mark's side. By the way, I'm just super excited to work with Abel. I love his heart as well. And this is one example of a branding guide, or a style guide. So the marks, the brothers, the elements, because a lot of the stuff shifts around. But how you tie different, whether it's different ecosystems or different colors or different marks, these are all things that could come together as style guides. We've got to be able to rebuild equal systems for all of the different systems that are out there, such as what we just talked about within a license plate per se. This is the right mark, or at least closer to it. But everyone should have a voice. So when we look at this type of a vote, people can come in and say, do I agree with it? Maybe, maybe not. In this particular case, I'm going to say I don't agree with it. So I'm loading up this same application. I'm going to scan it because I don't agree with that the brand is actually nailed. I think I turned it off soon. Oh, you know what? I may have set it so that it expires too quick. Let's try the opposite. Yeah, so it was successful on my side, so it tells me that it's actually expired. But you can see how voting can actually occur in real time with people actually having their own voice, but someone else not actually registering it. Let me see if this one, if I did the same error on this one as well. And if you want, I can show you how. Okay, so this one you can actually see. So there's a date time frame on it. So you can see that that was actually approved. And what this topic was ties to the license plates. So wanting to actually go and approve a pilot. So I don't know if you saw that, but it's a motion to approve a pilot to issue the Kingdom of Hawaii license plates. Now, you may think, well, everybody in the world needs to be able to be aware of this. So I'm going to go to Twitter. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm going to try and. So this is actually the meeting that we currently have in real time. So I don't know if you really recognize this, but this is the same meeting that we're having right now. It is streaming live. So you can see a couple people are watching it. You can also go and see it on different channels. So you'll be able to see this continue to cascade in real time. The other thing that's important to note is these type of assemblies that are digital and online can actually be recorded and transcribed in real time. And then the topics can actually be sliced and diced. So if someone talks about watermelons with pink elephants, you can literally build all of that in to legislation and documentation in the future. Everything we're doing is actually a type of digital exhaust. And if we do it as the Hawaiian Kingdom in a way that leads the future, we can actually be a part of the future and not go back through the craziness of what I believe we saw with that insurance dialogue. To get licensed, it shouldn't be through the existing systems. It's all around data, right? So if it's data and heuristics within data, then you should be able to build systems within an environment like this that would actually prove to provide a better ecosystem. So, I've talked about a lot of stuff. I've shown you a system that can be used, that is actually being used in real time. It's not just voting within councils or elections or topics, but you can literally have companies that have votes, you can have elections, and you can derive them in real time. So, and not only that, but if you jump into a company like here, you can actually create a company vote. So this is a poll. So I could create one in real time, is sky blue? This is what I failed to do the wrong way. So you have to do it into the future. So yes or no. This is a poll within a company, but you can do it within any kind of ecosystem. And when people actually go, let's go and see if that's actually public. What company is this with? Tangerine. So we're going to go back here. We're going to come over here. And you would be able to see it within a polling system. So here's a sky blue, yes or no. So you can see that poll is live. If I were logged in as a part of that actual association, I could actually vote on it. So it's not just companies, but it's organizations. Because when you create an entity within here, so if we come back, you can create not just a company, but a benefit or a community or a decentralized autonomous organization, or even a special purpose vehicle for investments, or maybe even a trust. But again, the way that you actually do it is not through username and passwords. It's through the ability to actually log in and log out with 5-factor authentication with a system that is the future, that uses cryptographic keys that are derived keys. This is a derived key within a Hawaiian kingdom, or the Kingdom of Hawaii, if we nail the name correctly. But we need to be respectful of others that are out there. And I think if we're respectful in the naming and accountability process, for instance, this document right here, for those of you that can see this is a whole nother Kingdom of Hawaii with their own style guide that is actually more advanced than anything that I've shown you here. These are wonderful people that want to tie things together, but ultimately it's like a phrase of, they're in different canoes with different leaders and different rowers, but they're all rowing in the same direction. And that's what I would, when I look at these islands, the people that are here, and it's not just these, but the 25,000 other islands through the Pacific, they understand decentralization in the core. The things that I'm talking about they're not foreign concepts, because that is how they survived over time, whether it was in Tahiti, whether it was in Rarotonga or Atutaki or Samoa. These islands could actually feed themselves and their visitors, especially the Hawaiian Islands. Now, what has happened? 90% of food is imported. 85% of food on Oahu is imported. $3 billion a year is spent on food every year. Right now, we think the world it's safe and we've got supply chain coming into these little islands. But what happens if they don't? What happens to the individuals that are left on these islands? Historically, they survived. And they will again, but there will be massive deaths because of population density and supply chain. But with a system like this, we can literally stand up a solution which is all around shopping. And this wonderful man has spelled it out. For those that are not aware of Raghu, he has built Raghuonomics and ran for political parties 4 different times. This last time, his mother died in the middle of him running, and he didn't make it. To register a political party in the federal elections within the United States of America, to put pressure on politicians around shopping. It's called the Shopping Party. And all it's about is basically doing something very simple: growing food locally, buying food locally with a local currency. If we do those 3 things, and it can be a fun, exciting activity, if we do those 3 things, everything around commerce and food and supply chain and dependencies and centralization can go away. So I'll stop because there's a lot more that I can go over. If you'd like, I can continue, but maybe we should take some questions.
I have a question. Michael?
Please.
So I'm just curious. You brought up the Twitter feed and whatnot, and that this is live. What part of this was live? Was it just you, or was it everybody else, or
It was
none of it, or what?
it was only my presentation and with the blessing of the king before.
Well, thank you. I was a little concerned because I wasn't alerted that I would be live, and I wasn't. So thank you very much.
And that is a perfect example of a human right. Because in the world of freedom of speech, everything is basically recorded, unless you're associated with the Private Membership Association, where you can actually be private. But in all reality, everything is actually being recorded. We are on a feed that is within a different system. This system is actually owned, and I'm not saying that the Chinese are bad, because I do not believe that the Chinese are bad. As a matter of fact, the Chinese are some amazing people. But the systems that they're living within are controlled like we would never understand. The Chinese own Zoom, and every word that we're saying inside of this platform is being recorded, and none of us own the recordings. The platform that we will do these future meetings on, the individual will own their own data. They will own their own recordings. But this body has to get used to being transparent and honest in everything that we do. When we communicate, we need to communicate like the king communicates, in certainty, in fact, because we know it spiritually before we do it with our voice or physically. But
Well, I'm not arguing that point, Michael. I'm arguing the point that if I were to be currently broadcast, I would like to know in advance.
Mhm.
What we say is transparent. What we do is transparent. The king was going to record this. At one point he was, maybe he isn't now. And yes, Zoom controls all of this, but I simply think that no one is implying we're trying to hide something. And we're certainly being watched, because I can tell you what, the US is watching everybody they want to. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to be broadcast live, I would like to know in advance. And that was my point.
And that is the point of GDRP, and why some of the things within not just the European Union, but the Pacific Union are so important. Because if everything is actually tracked and traced and meta tagged, then if we remove our identity from it, it doesn't really matter. But we can come back to it and say, that was my doing. That is my education. That is my bank. That is my work. That is my income. And we can prove without a shadow of a doubt, cryptographically prove who we are. And if we take accountability as individuals, and if the Hawaiian Kingdom or the Kingdom of Hawaii takes the leadership on this, it will change humanity. And it's exactly with the uneasy feeling of what you just felt. But if you take it to a standpoint of, it's not just a feeling of being watched, not when you're online, not when you're being recorded, not when you're driving around, but maybe when people figure out that digital money, not the digital world or decentralization, but digital money can actually be programmed. So where you go, you can't spend it. If you don't do certain things in compliance, you can't actually buy those types of items. And if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you can't even travel. Traveling and privacy are two God-given rights, and even in America, they're protected by the Constitution. But I would say the human rights associated with them throughout the world are not being realized. So, next question. Thoughts, feedback, perspective.
All right, so Michael, real quick question, because we pop back and forth between your presentation. Do you have a presentation that you can send to the council or a link where we can actually go through it, take the time to play with it, and see what else we might want to look at having added, or getting other third parties to kind of see what we might be able to want to look at?
Yeah, if you go to hawaiian.life, so www.hawaiian.life, and I can share my screen and walk you through it real fast at the same time. And by the way, Brad, totally on your same page. And I really appreciate the perspective in question there. So if you jump back to...
Okay, we're on it.
So if you go to hawaiian.life, and then what you do is you click on councils, and then you can click on general council. You can see different council members. And by the way, this is how you can join a council, just by downloading Hawaiian Life and scanning that. And then you can see all the different council meetings. So here you can see, the date, the time frame, the location for it. And then you can look at future, let's see. So this is Kingdom of Hawaii. So this is the actual one that we were just on. So you can see this particular topic, and then you can go through the agenda that we just went through. And then you can see if these are hyperlinks. So you can actually click on these to actually get into them. And so that's where you can go through some of the content that we just went through. So here's a perfect
Okay,
example.
you're saying that the presentations are going to be in some of these hyperlinks?
Yeah, exactly. So this is a perfect example. So this gentleman's last name should not be here. But the rest of these names, they don't have context, they don't have the details. But you can go in and you can actually modify these meetings. So I'll come back into councils, go to general, I'll find this correct meeting. So it's the 13th, so I'll edit the meeting. This is the main meeting and edit here. And the location, by the way, this will be the new location for the future meeting next week, which I'll work with the King to get that out. But if you come back here, you can go through and actually look at the agenda and modify it. So you can see this gentleman here, his last name should not be disclosed there. So this is just other. So it's just that simple. So you have anonymous management of anonymous system that can actually be transparent, and it can actually transact in fact. So all these transactions that are happening, when you create businesses, when you create assets, when you do transactions, all of it is transparent, but people don't actually see who is behind it. The individual's identity is not disclosed. Does that make sense? So
okay, so where you're at right now, where is that on this link? So when you're starting to go through,
it's on the main page. So Hawaiian.life. So if you just go right to the main homepage and scroll down, just keep scrolling down. So you'll go through identity management.
Okay, so that's where it is.
Financial management.
Okay, we see.
All right, we got it now.
Land management. Any other questions, thoughts, feedback?
I'd just like to make a comment. I like the idea of the local currency also. I think it's good so that the people can establish new businesses, and they can also find value in exchanging amongst themselves. And we can even give credit systems for people that use that that currency so that they get value in the community, whether it's riding a public transportation for free, or whether it's getting something from some additional something for using the local currency. Plus, it'll strengthen the local commerce.
Yeah,
That's-
commerce is actually how initially the Hawaiian Islands were taken over. It was through commerce and the US dollar. And if you peg the Hawaiian dala, which was there before the US dollar was the standard, the Hawaiian dala actually paired with 1-to-1. So you basically have one Hawaiian dala to one US dollar. You can then move the existing value exchange to the existing system. And to your point, if someone spends, let's say I go to a hotel and I pay for a hotel with the Hawaiian dala because the hotel chain actually accepts the payment because they can get paid in real time. There's no fees, and they can issue loyalty points. And this is to your point. They can issue loyalty points. They can issue the Marriott rewards right there. You get an Envoy account. When you're spending on a US dollar, you automatically got, a 10th of a point, or however it works. And those wallets, the reward systems and the currency systems and securities and assets all fit into one wallet that's within one jurisdiction. So your comment is just brilliant, spot on.
Well, I've been to many conferences on this particular subject, and because there were systems in other countries that were failing, such as Brazil had put in a public transportation system, but nobody would ride the bus. So they started, and they also had a street pollution problem where people were just throwing trash around. So they decided to exchange credits for cleaning up the streets that you could ride the bus for free. Well, everybody started cleaning up the streets, and they also started riding public transport. Everything worked out together in the community. So that was one example. And then there was another one where there was in the Pacific Northwest, there was a community of people that could see that they could exchange a lot more goods and services if they used a local, well, they were using it like a coupon, but they were able to put their coupons into the local newspaper. People were clipping coupons, and suddenly everybody's trading coupons, and it was saving them all money, and it was improving their economy.
You got it.
So yeah, well, I would love to talk about that, because in a rare situation like this, where we have the islands and we have that isolation, I think that this would serve very well.
You're brilliant. You're absolutely brilliant. So right, think about another example where, let's say someone does something wrong. Let's say that a child spray paints on a wall a word. They tag something. And that child then, they're learning that's damage, that's vandalism, and you have a consequence for that. So instead of sending that child to juvie or whatever they do, you could even say prison for an adult, let's say they do something that's even worse, that what you do is you give them community service. And so you say, you're going to show up at this location at this time and take a photo, and then you're going to clean all of the mess that you took the photo of, and then you're going to take a photo when it's done, and then you're automatically going to get paid for community service, and you didn't even have a human in the middle of it. It was automated. But then let's say that someone else says, you know what, I don't want to do community service. Let's say it's someone in a different industry that's done something, I can't even come up with an example, but let's say that someone has done something really wrong and they don't want to do the community service. They could buy that time and effort from someone else. It's to what you're saying. It's a value exchange, whether it's coupons, whether it's trading. But in this ecosystem, we're using the intelligence of organized technology using math. Math is just what cryptography is made of, what the world will call crypto, and then they shy away from it because it's a technology that can actually change and leapfrog over the existing systems. But it's to the point of what you're saying. It's just a value exchange. But if we can intelligently use these devices, these GPSs and these cameras and these things as devices to actually govern ourselves and to have our own reputation, think about someone that's actually doing community service continually. Most of those types of people wouldn't even want it to be broadcast. But imagine if we could build reputation, you know, and do it in a way that is just the future. I'll give you an example of the reputation. And I don't know if my screen is still streaming or not, but I'm going to jump into the website like I did before. And I'm just going to click on services, and I'm going to look for reputation. So
You'll need
reputation.
to share if you want to, because you're not streaming.
Okay. Thank you for the heads up. So imagine reputation at the individual level. For instance, today, majority on this call have what's called a FICO score, whether it's through TransUnion, Equifax, or Experian. And FICO score basically comes from Fair and Isaacs, two guys that come together that created an algorithm that say, with this data set, this is the score. And the data sets are held by third parties like TransUnion, Equifax, and TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian.
Experian.
Thank you. So they're basically the source data providers that you can use an algorithm from the FICO organization. And do we really own that data? Do we control the inputs? Do we control how it's calculated? Do we even control the data that they store on us? Back to the other gentleman, Brad's point. Equifax was also one of the companies that was tagged by GDPR as a violation of privacy rights, because not only do they track who you are, who your family is, who your neighbors are, where you've lived, what you buy, what you pay for, what you don't pay for, but their data was breached, all of it. And the United States of America came out and said, no one can actually go after them. They're indemnified. So you tell me how that's a human right for all of our data, our social security numbers, everything to be taken. It's time that humanity takes back its own identity and its own data that it never really had, but in such an organized way where we can actually prove who we are and prove our own reputation. Then when we create an organization, that organization, just like the individual, gets its own reputation and its own ability to actually validate if it's a reputable entity or not. You know, it's similar to how the credit score works within the FICO system. And I can tell you that one of the men behind this system, his name is Sam Smith. He's a wonderful man, heart of gold. He's actually the one that came up with decentralized identifiers that's being standardized around the world. 5 years ago, I and a guy named Phil Windley from the Sovereign Foundation went to Korea because Korea actually standardized on this technology that long ago, way before COVID. But not only is it the individual or the organization, but also the assets. So some people say, you know, crypto is actually something where it's just a scam. It's because they don't understand the asset and they don't understand the encryption keys. If you own the asset and the encryption key, you're not going to lose it. And I believe there's a future where the individuals can actually have their family, or as they would say in Aotearoa, their whakapapa, actually identify who they are. They can validate who they are. So if they lose their 12 words, their family can actually rebuild who they are. And it works on a simple system just like this. So there's 2 screens within the Life app. So this is within Hawaiian Life or Tuvalu Life or Samoa Life or Saudi Life. And the user has an interface that says, I'm actually going to share the data within calendaring, within support, within identity, within medical, within web, or maybe where I browse, maybe what I search, maybe within how I nav, maybe within the Life app, maybe within text messages. They don't share the actual data. They share the metadata associated with it around transactions. So how often do you browse? How often do you move around? How often do you drive? How fast do you drive? All that data doesn't go anywhere, but it can be validated that they are who they are. A machine cannot copy this. An individual that is alive can do this. Now, can they do it with 10 phones at the same time and build reputations? Sure, but they can't keep doing all of it with all of the different systems. And then on the right, it's really simple. If someone's going to say, I'm going to issue credit in this new digital world, maybe I'm going to issue insurance, maybe I'm going to issue financing. They can actually select how much they want to weight those transactions. If someone's keeping a calendar, if someone's browsing the web or doing X, Y, and Z, people can say how much they want to schedule it. So this is literally a reputation management system with a credit underwriting system that is just the start, but you can see how simple it has to get. The data behind these pages on just this site alone, the white papers behind it, I'm going to search. This gentleman created key receipts, which is actually, and I'll pull it up real fast. He's an amazing human being, but this is actually who he is. Right here out of Utah, wonderful man, PhD from BYU. And this is all of the resources just on that one reputation topic, an identity topic. This is just one paper on it right here. And by the way, everything that we do is open source, it's transparent, everyone in the world can have it. This is how the key receipt stuff works. And then you take derived keys from this carry system, and you can then manage reputation. So this Sam Smith is moving his focus not just to identity, but over to reputation next around the algorithms. Just like the guys behind Fair Isaac, the Fair and Isaac with FICO, those guys came together to create the algorithms. He's doing the same thing. What you're seeing here is what the European banking organizations are actually adopting as their financial standard around identity. It's the same system that we're talking about. The barcode organizations are building. The QR code organizations are building. This technology is here to stay. The question is, will it be centralized or will it be decentralized, which is the core concept when we talk about this up here. This is the key. Decentralization, where things can actually autonomously operate on their own because of their own intelligence and voice. All of us are brilliant, and we all have an opinion based upon our perception. Our perceptions may change over time, so our opinions may change over time. But instead of having centralized systems where, and this is why I love the king that we're talking about, he gives his honor, his life to Akua, to God, to our creator. And he serves us in that heart and that purpose, not in the way of hierarchical structures and organizations and corporations and governments. He serves us in this way. That's why this voice of all of us feels respected and heard. So with that, I'll stop again. Any questions, thoughts, anything else?
Yeah, I've got a question for you, Mike. Now, I tend to know your product a lot better than a lot of people do, but that being said, there's a little bit of a kumbaya in this stuff, the way you're talking about this, but there's also, I want to go specifically to the reputation management because it goes into business and also into the personal life too, of, you're right now, if I've got ABC restaurant and you've got DEF restaurant and yours is a new one and mine's got an incredible reputation, you got 20 employees, you're going to have, not you, but the DEF restaurant is going to create 20 bad reviews and on my restaurant. That's the way the current reputation management system works. And the way it currently works is it's next to impossible to get out of that for the ABC restaurant to do. Same thing would go for the bullying of children today, because that's going on all over the place. And that's the same idea in a different manner, but it's called bullying. And what's your reaction to that, and how would that be different with the reputation manager? Because that's not something I've asked about in the past with you.
I think the two use cases are beautiful examples, and the question's wise. Here's the response. If someone goes and creates negative reviews, then those reviews are from them, and it's transparent. So let's say they go and create 50 negative reviews. People will see that they've created those 50 negative reviews. It's transparent. If someone has bullied someone and continues to bully them, or let's say they bullied person A and person A had a dispute over it, and person B is bullied as well. The point is, inside of this system, things are more transparent. Everything can actually be here. I'll go through and share.
So I'll push back just a little bit. If 50 people, again, I've got ABC restaurant and 50 people have given me a bad review, I have no idea who the heck they are or what they did. And if I've got a small business, I don't have the money or time to go hunt each one down and find out what happened and maybe challenge it. So, I'd like to get that information. Now, if I truly have bad, then, again, how do I manage that idea?
So what you would do if someone, let's say somebody is being bullied and there's a dispute, they would basically create the dispute. So they would log in, create the dispute, and the disputes could either be public or they could be private. And if it were public or private, people would go through an arbitration process, and they could have mediators that go through and say, hey, this really isn't right. Or and this technology, different from the Zoom technology, and there is a webinar version of Zoom that does this, but you can actually have party A and party B inside of two separate rooms. And in the moderation or arbitration process, you can say, hey, did you really hit this boy or a girl or a person? And yes or no. Okay, well, you've actually been tagged doing this with bullying. And it could be just as simple as, and again, this is like, think about it. Let's take it to a whole nother level. Sexual predators. We have databases right now of sexual predators that have to register within where they live, and you can actually see everything about them, their name, their photo, their address. That is an example of how a system is doing things that are transparent. But what if, and I'm not justifying the sexual predator side of it at all, but let's say that this individual actually wants to make things right in his life or her life. That stuck with them in such a way where how do they get out of it or rebuild? Well, the point is don't ever get into it, right? But I can tell you that there's a part of life, and there's a reason why certain things end and expire within 7 years. When we look at the Jubilee, when we look at forgiveness, when we look at the reasons why we're here and where we're learning, it's like, as kids, you teach them true and correct principles and then let them govern themselves, right? But along the way, they're going to make mistakes. And a part of making the mistakes is how they're also going to learn in life too. It's like the light and the dark are continuing to fight. And how do you actually learn through life? Well, whether it's the bully, whether it's the reviews, whether it's the sexual predator, that data needs to be transparent. The neighborhood needs to know what's next door to them. But do they need to know such details that actually ruins those individuals' lives in such a way where they take their lives? The goal is to be able to live within society with virtues and values. And when we look at those virtues and values, this document, this Declaration of Unity, is something that I would hope that we could get on board with, because it talks about decentralization versus centralization, but ultimately life, love, family, community, and choice based around individuals' accountability and responsibilities to virtues, to one another, to community.
Can I jump in here? In Margaret Mead's studies, there was a tribe in Western Africa that actually had a solution for this, and the solution was quite beautiful, and it would apply here. If you're going to create a new society structure, what they would do is, if somebody did something wrong in their community, they would have their general meeting and bring the person, or have an emergency meeting and bring the person into the circle. And the whole tribe would get around and they would dance around this person. And they would dance in different circles, whether elders or younger, and the person who had the issue with the person, and they would voice their issue. And then the person who was in the center could defend themselves to their whole community. And at that moment, everybody would forgive the person. And then they would all continue to dance, and that person would know that now the whole community was supporting them in their correct action. Now, we have a possibility here of actually having community once again thrive. And so you have those sort of structures that are possible. Let's not create the prison system. Mm-hmm. Let's create the community system of healing. And so I think that's another thing that can be addressed at some time. I also want to say one more thing off this topic, but very quickly, is that we're quickly approaching the time when the SWIFT system is going to die, and that we're coming into a period when the founders of the SWIFT system, and the owners of the SWIFT system are the founders and owners of the central bank digital currencies. And they're going to just transition from one to the other and try and get as many central banks to conform as quickly as possible. And so I think that we just need to be aware of that.
The urgency that we need around this needs to be every single day. Not one day can we let go by. The timing and dispensation that we get to live in, an opportunity, and I would even say responsibility that we all have. We all have a responsibility to not just ancestors, but to future generations to be able to stand up a system that is not centralized, that is not using CBDCs. It's one thing to say there's a better system than the SWIFT system, but just like and I even think, and this may be crazy, but I think the first part of your comment around community versus currencies is actually even more important, because how we love one another and respect one another and honor. And that's why Aloha is the real solution for all of humanity. You know, it's not about technology. It's not about SWIFT versus CBDC it's about how we can actually use technology to benefit humanity for future generations. And we may not see it right now, but 5 generations down the road, if a system like this is truly adopted, can you imagine what choices they can make that's so much better than the choices that how they can educate, how they can parent, how they can, there's so exponentially. I mean, it's actually saddened to me. Before we did decentralized technologies for the last 13, 14 plus years, maybe even longer, we did centralized technologies, and we managed every healthcare in different states, from any payer and any insurance company, like literally. And when we looked at the data, it was like, what can we learn from this data? So if an individual has these symptoms and they take this type of a recommendation and they have these outcomes, could we learn from this and say this actually works and this doesn't work? And it was mind-blowing to see how much money people made off of mystery and margin. Because
Okay, guys, thank you. I need to stop in 4 minutes.
Your Majesty, I have one important point I need to follow up with. If you give me just Michael, part of my query earlier, and I just sent off my PowerPoint to somebody, and in my email I said, please don't disseminate this because I've not reviewed it for disclosures. I'm licensed by 43 different regulatory bodies. I'm appointed with 40 different companies. I mentioned a few of the names. I would never disseminate something publicly that I have not reviewed for disclosures that are required to be there. And that part is part of the point where people that aren't licensed may not know that. So I just wanted to follow up. If anybody's going to ask me for something, or anybody's going to distribute something without my knowledge, I need to know about it because I'm actually liable for it. And I didn't know if you knew that. Maybe you don't, maybe you do. But I wanted to follow up with that. That's the secondary point of being licensed and regulated. So I just wanted to mention that.
That's exactly why this type of technology is important. When we look at the oil industry, we look at Standard Oil, and the Rockefellers and other organizations and families were behind it. And they could hide in such a way where people wouldn't know what they were doing, even though there were multiple different companies and multiple different licensing ecosystems that could then take over an industry. And there's a reason why Standard Oil was actually disseminated to multiple different or monopoly, anti-monopoly type systems. When today we know it as Chevron or Exxon. But the point is these secret combinations are really what's driving these different industries, whether it's pharmaceutical, whether it's technology, whether it's healthcare, whether it's finance, whether it's banking. And when we create a transparent environment, one would have to ask themselves, do they really need a license to be able to say a word? If they're being transparent, if they're being honest, and I'm not saying that you're not. I believe everything that you're absolutely saying is forthright. And I also understand that we live within a society of rules, but I would question the difference between a lawful system and a legal system. And I choose not to be associated with the insurance industry. I choose not to be associated with the banking industry and the healthcare industry. All of those industries, I specifically walked away from all of them because I saw the secret combinations and I stood up in front of a company that we were like, we'll pay insurance premiums, we'll do all of these different things, or you can just take it in Ben dollars and actually feed yourself better food. But it's not a matter of what's right or what's wrong, but transparency will bring a disinfectant with the light that comes. The question is, can we do it in such a way where we're responsible and accountable and to humanity? You know, it's not something that we need to be afraid of. It's something that we should try and embrace if we can see the benefits of it. And
Okay.
it'll take time, but I hope you understand the response there.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, we're running out of time here, but I wanted to, end some of this discussion is that I believe in transparency. I believe in integrity and I believe in honor. I believe that every member here has a voice and those voices will be heard, understood and respected. I believe that no one here is better than the next. I look at all of you and myself as equal. And we all serve the greater good. And that's where I come from. I agree with you, Michael, about transparency. But I also feel that everything has to be done in such a way that it's nothing to be afraid of, in such a way that honesty and integrity is there. It's not someone's opinion. And then someone says bad things about someone. And to Charles' point, the inability to make corrections, because it can be transparent one thing, but that transparency could be wrong information. When a person wants to correct it or tries to correct it, it goes against him or her.
Mm-hmm.
So where Charles is at, I understand his position. Where Barbara is talking about some of the things, and she brought a point out with a country that where they would dance around the person and to forgive the person and everybody walk away and etc. Or not forgive the person. This is more in line with the Kupuna Council back in the ancient Hawaii, where they would sit in a circle and talk amongst each other and forgive and move forward. That's how they brought a sense of harmony, not necessarily law and order, but harmony, where everyone was able to express, denounce, and move forward, or express, accept, and forgive. Those were the things. That's called Ho'oponopono. And that's where that came from in that regard. And where Kirk is talking about the insurance industry, etc., he's talking about a value. And the value that he understands now, and I understand, is that these licenses that he has a responsibility as broker to ensure that he's following the current law and its current systems. And as we move forward as a nation, we'll be able to govern who we are as a people. You brought up other kingdoms and other people in this communications. And I appreciate all of that, because there are a few of them. And like you said, they're going in the same direction, but on different canoes. I would argue yes and no. Everything has to do with personality and who the person is. And some may be a more dynamic leader, and some of them may not even have the genealogy of the Koko to do it correctly. You're smiling, so you know where I'm coming from.
Totally.
So we can be nice and talk about distance in that way. But if we're like me, I'm always upfront. We're talking about the integral part of who we are as a human being. The first priority is to live in harmony with nature. The second, the natural world. The third and foremost is with God. And the fourth with each other as the human family. So as Mo'i, I listen very carefully to what people all say. And if I was to judge this meeting and this quorum, if you will, I would simply say that everyone here are learning. Everyone will continue to be exposed to different ideas and different ideology. Everyone here are respectful, and everyone here is truly respectful and lovers of the aloha word, aloha, and who we are as a people. Everyone here have been chosen by me. They come bearing not wealth of all these mega millions and trillions or whatever they might have, but they come with the spirit of aloha, humble, only wanting to serve and be part of all the things that we're doing to correct the substantial wrongs that the kingdom experienced in 1893 and all those things. And I choose to arm myself with the armor of God and to move forward, standing upright, regardless of what anybody may think of me. It's not relevant. I'm not here for any one person. I'm here because I believe with all my heart that the good Lord put me in this place. And I've suffered a lot, gained a lot, respect, but I also learned a lot. And the thing I've learned more in today's meeting is that everyone here listened. They listened to you. They listened to Kirk. They listened to Keston. Everyone listened. And that to me is more valuable because it showed the respect to everyone. And everyone has opinions, and those opinions I treasure. And I remember one person saying to me that he was such and such and come from this whole line and et cetera. Lanny isn't here, but if he was, he would confirm. But he's having internet problems. That's why he's not here. And some of the other people not here, same problems, same issues. But I remember this person telling me that he came from this and this and this and this line and that line, and he is da da da. I looked at him and I smiled. Oh, he did say, I know you can kick my butt. I know you can wipe me clean. I know you can do this. And I didn't say anything, I just smiled. And I said to him, if you can set aside your ego, if you can serve the people, and you can serve them with love, and you can serve them without asking for anything except their love, and you can earn that, then I'll step away and you be the king. He said, no, I cannot do that. And that's a true story. And then I met another person who said to me, why did Kamehameha have to kill anybody? There was no wars in the Hawaiian Islands, and we had this and that. Why he had to do that? Is it because John Young gave him the weapons to kill the Hawaiians? What is his ego up there? What's wrong with him? How come he did this and that? And I said to him, I said, well, the nice thing about it is at least you got his name correct. But what's important here is not so much that he went around unifying, killing anybody. His motive at one point was to unify people. However way he did it, right or wrong, that's what he did, is to unify all the islands. And for that, I am grateful. Because we have 219 islands. People don't know that. They think we only have 8. Our entire archipelago, if you know history. And then the same person said to me, now I know why you're the king. You're smart. Again, I had to smile again. I said, none of that is relevant. What's relevant is the true education of who we are as a people. I have a deep love for Kamehameha the First, second, third, all of the Kamehamehas, because they taught me a wonderful lesson of life. And no matter what you give to someone, it's never enough. No matter how much land you give to another person, it's never enough. No matter what education a person has, it's never enough because people want more. So how do you combat that? You don't. You simply move forward and they'll fall in line and they'll do what is correct. And you mentioned other people in this discussion. Keanu Sai, I have a great deal of love and respect for Keanu Sai. his ability as a teacher, as a professor. He has his doctorate in political science, as do I. And I love the history that he does. He has remarkable skills. And Leon Hsu, I've known him for years. And I support anybody and everybody who is teaching the correct education of the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii. Anybody. But there's only one Kingdom of Hawaii, and that's us. There's no other Kingdom of Hawaii, and that's us. We come from the highest bloodline, the Naupua line, all of that, the Noho line. We are that. And because we know that, we have a great responsibility of being humble, of being kind, of being respectful. And that is how we ought to be and are. So I'm grateful and I'm thankful to all of you for being here today. And the word love is probably the most important word. My sister Crystal, she's not here, but every time she hears someone says love, she says, "Do you know how important that word is? Do you know what you guys really talking about? That's not just a word you throw out there. You know what love really, really is? It's a very strong and powerful word. It's very strong. So if you can use the word love, make it meaningful, because it is a very powerful word. And that is aloha. That's aloha. Michael, thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And Keston, thank you for yours. And Kirk, thank you for yours. I will be talking to you later, Kirk, and those and all your comments. Does anyone have, I'm sorry we're running out of time. Normally I would like all of you to say a word or two, but our meetings went a little long. But if anybody have any questions, Lamaku.
Your Majesty and all, I've sent you important information that I had expected that you would address today. This is from Almighty. The words that I sent by email to everyone and yourself regarding the having in as your core the understanding of Kamakohonu and the unity that is there by law of God. Awoha Kama Mako Kalama is in place. At the passing of my dear mother, this was ordered by a Kuan. And so what I gave to you folks all is true. And I bring it forward for the fact that the meeting is almost closed and you haven't. I speak on it, and I am told that from this point forward, I am to go by my royal name.
Thank you, Lamaku. I will give you a call so we can Valao Kukal in a little bit. And thank you.
Your Majesty, I've been asked that this was circulated because it is to be expressed from this point forward to all. And so thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. Abel, thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you, and we'll talk. Lamaku will give you my information as soon as we're finished with this conference here, meeting. I want you to call me.
Thank you very much. I'm honored, Your Highness.
Thank you. And thank you, Victoria. Oh, aloha, Amy.
Aloha, Your Majesty.
I didn't see you. And Dustin, thank you. I'm sorry, we got just 5 more minutes. We have to close now before it goes down, but we'll talk a little later, guys. Thank you so much. Auntie Victoria, please give closing prayer.
Mahalo nui a oi. Mahalo ke akua for bringing all this knowledge and wisdom into this space. We thank you, and we always are in loving care of thee, and always our foundation is strong. Because of you, one heart, one mind, unity in all for our kingdom. No kupuna no kingdom Na au makua mai kalahiki a kalakau, mai ka ho'okui a ka halawai. Na au makua ia ka hina kua, ia ka hina alo, ia ka akau i talani, o kiha i talani, o ve i talani, nulu i talani, ka holo i talani. Eia ka pulupula ia o ko, no ke akua, ke au puni o Hawaii. E malama o kou ia mākou. E ulu i talani, e ulu i tā honua, e ulu i tā pai aina o Hawaii. E hō mai ka ike, e hō mai ka ikaika, e hō mai ike akamai, e hō mai ka mau popo pono, e hō mai ka ike pāpālua, e hō mai tā mana. Heavenly Father, we ask you to bless our King and all that he does for us, to build our foundation stronger in aloha. We love thee, Father in heaven, and all that thou represents. And we mahalo nui ia o ko, our Royal Majesty. Amama ua noa. Amen.
Amen. Aloha. Thank you so much, everyone. And before we depart, the reason why Keston came out and talked with it because it was on my prompting. What we're building as far as a secure place, in the event that we have a catastrophic problem, I'm also duplicating the Hawaiian Islands. So wherever we are, and if these bad actors continue to do bad things, we don't need to be bullied. The word bully came out in the conversation. We don't need to be bullied by these individuals that would want to cause mayhem and chaos around the world. We can continue to move forward as a nation, as a people. We don't need to be in that script that they're trying to script for us, because that is not who we are or need to be. But I thank all of you. Mahalo nui loa. Aloha, everybody. Thank you.
Aloha, ahui ho, malama pono.
Aloha, everyone.
Aloha.